the STEAM that was asked for by the board, I think a couple meetings ago now. So Mark and Jen, please.
Well, good evening. Thanks for having us back. We're here just to give you a brief update. It hasn't been that long in school months since we saw you guys last, but there's been a lot going on at Scranton as we've kind of continued this journey we talked to you guys about a couple of months back. Shortly after leaving you, one of the steps we took is we did a parent and student survey to get some data from the kids who were 9th graders this year. So we asked them to look back on their experience from 1 year prior and give us some feedback on a number of different topics, from the rigor of the curriculum, to the amount of the homework, for their feelings of preparation for high school, to just a variety of different things. So we collected that data. Actually, it is still open, and we are still getting responses from folks in the community. And we're looking forward to using that data when we return in September with our staff to be able to begin planning for this year as well. We have a new hire with us. We had a counseling vacancy that I know you guys saw come across the table. It was one of our counselors moved to the west side of the state. And one of our English teachers moved into that counseling position, which opened up an English spot. And we were very excited because we had the opportunity to bring on board Jessica Gus, who is standing 2 people behind me. And Jessica, in her prior school, was a STEAM teacher. So it was a really exciting opportunity for us to bring somebody in with a lot of expertise. We had looked at her potentially as a STEAM coach and been trying to figure out a way to make that happen where she could be available to staff throughout the day to support the STEAM initiative we're looking at. We're not sure that's going to come to fruition, but regardless, having her on staff, having her in our building as a teacher, able to support our staff as we make this transition is going to be just a huge asset for us. Over the course of the summer, we've had faculty members taking part in all kinds of training sessions and opportunities to grow their own knowledge in this area. We had staff participate in the Apple's Best Practices Conference. Our science staff have been involved in a number of STEAM-based training programs, both the MyStar program, which is directly connected to the new curriculum implementation we're doing, as well as a couple of other science-based and STEAM-based training programs. We had a team of teachers. Mr. Ted Wagner is here with us tonight. He was one of our teachers. Scott Turner, who you were with at the last meeting. They both attended, it was great actually, with Jennifer and my contacts with Oakland Schools from our prior employment. We were able to get Oakland Schools to agree to allow Brighton to send a team to join their STEAM PBL program out there. So it's a program that will last the entire school year. And they had an intensive 3-day over the summer, and then they come back and regroup with the same group and move through as a cohort. So again, just because of some contacts that we had, we were able to make that happen. It was super exciting. So Jessica's part of that team, Ted is part of that team, Scott Turner is part of that team, and that will really help us quite a bit. There was also a simple K-12 one-day conference. We had a number of staff participate in that. It's an online conference that's directly related to STEAM education as well. And then as recently as earlier this week, we had a day that we spent about an hour and a half with our implementation team and began talking about the next steps for us in terms of training the whole staff. And kind of the folks who did training over the course of the summer, one of the commonalities that came to fruition as we started talking about it was most of these STEAM-based educational programs for teachers put teachers in the seat of a student and teach them STEAM principles through helping them to experience what it feels like as a learner to be in a STEAM-educated situation. So we had a conference call earlier this week where we all got together and decided that's what we're going to roll out at Scranton initially as we start the school year as well. It's coming up with a driving question, which is at the core of any type of investigative STEAM-based education. And that driving question is going to be something that as a staff we all work toward as we start. I talked to you last time about kind of playing in the sandbox in September, right? We're kind of figuring this out, what it feels like and what it looks like. And we're going to use that driving question to make sure that the work we do is very intentional, very specific, and very geared in a direction of unity, something that we can all focus on together and kind of a common purpose that we can put in place. Finally, and not as an aside, but just an additional, we also have Sarah Barnes, who's a teacher in our building, who has been in training this week for medical detectives, which is another one of the Project Lead the Way courses. So we continue to bring those courses, which are STEAM-based, online, and we've been adding 1 to 2 of those each year, as well as the amazing work that Scott Turner has been doing our Science Olympiad program, which certainly aligns beautifully with this work as well. So that's a brief update. Jen, do you have anything to add? Yep.
We also have a group of teachers who have agreed to work on a book club with Launch, so it's understanding design thinking and STEAM-based education. And then we are going to be starting up, parents will be seeing some information regarding student roundtable and getting more student voice. We will have a group of students that will be working with us so we can understand what their experiences are, any tweaks that they feel we need to make in additions there.
Mr. Wilson, how are we doing we did the past 8th grade students for the survey? Are we going any to the 7th or 6th at all to see what the expectations are? We're just looking at where we're doing it. Because there was one time in high school, I think we did all grades, didn't we, Dr. Drake?
We do surveys for all grades every year.
Yeah.
There are NCAA sense of action surveys, but this is more
A
targeted.
little targeted, yeah. But
Yeah, so it's a great question, John. What we were looking at trying to get is, one of the pieces of data we looked at when we were kind of formulating a plan last year was the success data of our kids as they left Scranton. The great news was over 90% of our kids leave Scranton and are passing all of their classes in high school, which is fantastic. That's always your goal. But what we wanted to do was dig a little bit deeper and see, okay, but how did those kids feel about the challenge? How did those kids feel about, maybe they're pulling great, but when they stepped in week 2, were they feeling overwhelmed or prepared, right? Like, that's a whole different story. So that's why we went to the 9th graders to kind of get a real feel for what they're experiencing. What Jen was just talking about, that student roundtable, is something really very new to Scranton. We've not really had a group of kids that were in the building at the time that we were actively engaging in conversations about teaching and learning and rigor and all of that. So what we're hoping for is, instead of going with a survey, really giving opportunities for kids to sit with the administrative team and the team that's kind of leading this work, to be saying, how is this playing out for you in real life? What does this feel like? Is this good? Is this bad? Does this make sense? Is this challenging in ways you weren't challenged before? So we're trying to find ways of doing that face-to-face, person-to-person.
as we're aware, some of the students can teach us in certain topics. They have strengths and where we may not, they're up to speed and we're catching them, kind of, maybe not catching them. But I think we had a 4th grade teacher, and I recall her bringing her students forward, and she showed us 3 or 4 kids, if I recall, students that were teaching the class and helping her teach the coding. And I thought that was a real move forward. And she said, I found these young people that have this, they're teaching me, I'm learning from them, we know we need to do it. They have these gifts, and I guarantee you in our middle school population, there are gifted young people there that can also help us and give them, again, they may be further than we need to utilize them and be helpful for everyone concerned. So we need to find them though, because they are very, I've been working with a lot through the high school and some from middle school in the old days, and they kind of pass us in a way, you give them the tools and kind of a little bit of management, next thing you know, that's the goal, right? Good luck. We'll call us when you're the super aviation astronaut or whatever. So anything we can do in that, I would just support with you guys doing that. I think it's great that we're opening our minds to these things, and let's keep up with the hard work and see what we can turn out. Thank you for all the work.
A couple of questions. And I have 3 questions, and they're disparate, so I'll ask them and then give you a chance to respond to that. So the first one is, you talked about the process of getting feedback. Can you share maybe like 2 very positive and 1 not so positive results of getting that feedback that you're making adjustments to?
You're talking about student feedback?
The student feedback, sure.
Yeah, and I will say we're being cautious only in the sense that we want to make sure that we have that data to talk to staff about the first day. They're not hearing about it on Facebook and getting it in the context of what was intended. But in very general sense, the feedback on the social and emotional needs of kids being met is very, very strong. And we're super happy about that. That's been a huge focus for us at Scranton. Last year we started advisory groups of kids and trying to really focus on helping kids feel comfortable. And our scores for both parents and students in that regard were very, very positive. And again, the true test of our success, i.e. their success in transitioning effectively to high school, I would say is another really strong positive that we pulled out of this. On a negative side, I would say that it has become really clear in looking at the data that we really need to examine things like how we're preparing kids for the high school school homework load and the rigor of high school homework and such. And we're also looking at some things, it's really interesting, Dave, because some of the practices that are research-based and we know are really strong for kids, for example, the ability to do retakes and the ability to have second looks on tests and assessments that, you know, are definitely, we're proud of the fact that we do them, and we believe very strongly that they're the right things to do. As we're hearing back from some of our older kids, it's making us question some of those practices and processes and making us think to ourselves, do we need to tighten that up a little bit? Do we need to, you know, have we gone and we swung too far in that direction, right? And do we need to scale it back? So those are just in general some of the things we're kind of learning from the data. Very good.
Thank you for answering, and thank you for a great response. This question, and this is kind of directed towards you and towards Jessica as well. Welcome, by the way. But I guess the question is what can we do? You talked about Jessica being particularly well suited to teach an STEAM curriculum, but that she's only partially going to be teaching an STEAM curriculum. Is there anything that the board can do to enable her to do her best work at your school? So anyone can answer.
I think there's the perfect situation, and then there's the less than perfect, but still probably very workable situation, right? I mean, the perfect solution, the perfect situation is we built the middle school for next year where all of the departments, all of the classes, excuse me, have a common planning period. So all of my English 7 teachers are together at the same time, and none of them have kids. And social studies, same thing, and math, same thing. So they've got this beautiful opportunity to be able to do some planning together about how they can really address things like rigor within their teaching. They have a great opportunity because STEAM is not about what you teach, it's about how you teach, right? It's that pedagogy piece, not the content of curriculum. And so it gives them this great, rich opportunity to have those conversations and dialogue. That's going to happen regardless. One of the visions we had for Jessica, if we were able to pull her in as a coach, which is initially what we were thinking about and hoping for, is that she would be available each of the hours of the day. So she would be able to, when social studies was meeting, she'd be able to be in that room and pushing their thinking. You know, tell me where you're going next week. Okay, let's talk about what that might look like if it was, you know, had a STEAM-based approach to it versus a traditional way that they have been taught in the past. So what Jessica is going to provide for us is we have an expert in STEAM in our midst, which in and of itself is a huge bonus. You know, she was on the conference call we had the other day, and you know, already, and we've got Ted Wagner, who is just like out of this world good with STEAM-based, project-based stuff. Ted's been doing it since for 7, 8 years since we looked at project-based learning the first time, and what he's doing is remarkable. Now we've got Jessica on board, so I feel like we definitely have pieces. Carrie Harbrack was in my office. She went and did some of this training this summer. She's on fire about, you know, just the changes that she's ready to bring into the classroom when she starts next year. So I feel like we've got the pieces in place. There's a way to use her more effectively, but we're not sure if we're going to be able to get there or not. She's going to be a huge asset regardless. And I understand she's a phenomenal teacher. So. Lisa,
all right, so check. So the third, and this is as much a comment or a suggestion as it is, and this is towards the grand challenge idea. At universities, and we do this every year, is that sometime during the summer there is a unifying book assigned to incoming freshmen, and it motivates a lot of the grand challenge for the upcoming academic year. Okay, so things like, and obviously you have to find an age-appropriate book, but the type of books that they've used are books, Henrietta Lacks, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and you know that's probably not appropriate for middle school. But then another one was Harness the Wind, and it was about a young man in Africa who started building windmills in order to get fresh water to villages in Africa. And it was just interesting about, you know, he figured it out. And so something like that, and I don't know whether that fits into the curriculum at all, but, you know, something that, a unifying book to help motivate Grand Challenge for the upcoming year.
That's a great idea. We do have our kids do a summer read.
Okay.
That's Scranton today, but I think that idea of tying that in and having it be kind of a springboard for kids in this new way of thinking would be a really positive. And I guess what I'm saying is the structure's already there. It's a matter of finding the right title and stuff.
Yeah, it's fun, and I don't, you know, the book may exist. I don't know if it is, but you know, and it's appropriate for all grades. But I've seen it work before at the university setting. It might work
right
at the Scranton level.
Excellent. Thank you.
And then also, and this is a question for future plans, is that at some point after you've landed in this academic year and things are sane again, could you report out back to us again just about, to give us the concrete feedback that you received and then the implementation that you put in place based upon that feedback? And this can be, October-ish or something like that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, going back again to when you were here before, and I asked the question about follow-up and feedback. Anything changed since the answer we got the last time?
Tell me what the answer was last time, I'll say.
Dr. Suri answered it.
So what is the response? I don't know the question you're referring to, Bill, so I can't.
So what is going to be the mechanism of tracking what your initiatives are in order to see if they're working or not?
So a lot of the mechanisms would be the same mechanisms we use today. I mean, we certainly track student grades, we track student progress, we track student homework completion, we track attendance rates. All of that is a really good indicator for us as to whether what we're doing is working or not. Student roundtable is going to be huge for us this year. That'll be a whole new way of assessing, to be able to sit with the kids and have conversations with them about whether or not they're feeling challenged. We plan on replicating the same survey we did with ninth grade this year, a year from now. So we're hoping that the responses from our current eighth graders after their ninth grade year will reflect that they have had a more challenging, more rigorous experience, and that in some of the ways that maybe the current kids who were surveyed who did not feel like they were as prepared for things like homework, as I talked about, that they may be feeling more like that. From a very visual perspective, anecdotally in classrooms, part of STEAM-based education is really helping kids to think and problem solve and implement those 21st century skills in order to show their proficiencies instead of the paper and pencil test all the time. Being able to apply the principles you're teaching, think through those solutions and produce something to show that they've learned. That's a very different way than we oftentimes traditionally assess kids. And them being able to do that in and of itself is a fairly strong way to assess whether or not what we're doing is being.
So you'll be assessing them doing that?
Yeah, so in a class like Mr. Wagner's class, where he has been doing project-based learning for years, that is how kids are assessed. And you move from paper and pencil test, you move to a lot of rubrics. Ted and I were on the phone. Was that today or yesterday? Yesterday. And Ted was sharing some rubrics that he has been looking at, he's been developing for our whole staff, that helps us to begin to look at everything that we do through the lens of inquiry. When we talk about STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, when they talk about science, they're not really talking about science as in protons and neutrons. They're talking about science in the framework of like that investigative approach and that scientific method. And they're talking about how we think. They're not specifically talking about science, protons, neutrons. So as we move kids in that direction, and Ted is a genius with this, is moving to rubrics and assessments that not only assess content, but assess thinking. Are you thinking deeper? Are you thinking more thoroughly than you did before?
So then your assessment won't be what you started with, the fact that you're going to do it like you've done it in the past. You're going to try something different.
So as we move towards STEAM forces you to look at assessment differently, because you're not assessing kids, again, but multiple choice test is assessing content. When you move into a STEAM-based approach, you're not only assessing content, but you're assessing process, you're assessing thinking, you're assessing, you're accepting as a teacher that not every kid is going to answer this question at the same level. And then your rubric or your assessment is going to show that.
Okay, so you're going to do something different in assessing.
Correct.
Is that right? Is that a fair statement?
Very simply said, yes.
Okay. So then, are we going to be able to see any of the results of the survey and actually see the numbers, the amount of students that are enrolled at Scranton, the amount of students that have taken the survey, and what the results are?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd like to use them with our staff first. Again, I've
Sure. Yeah. And then my last question, I guess, is in regards to, again, we discussed the fact that Scranton is kind of in this awkward age group of kids. They're kind of between here and there, and they moved to the high school. So from that standpoint, I believe the culture in Scranton is still not defined. And I'm wondering what's going to be done for that culture, and I'll continue to call it culture of Scranton, to define really what Scranton is and how it's going to move forward compared to kind of this in-between area where these kids go for 2 years.
Well, I think there's some biological pieces to answer that question that I don't know that we fully can control. I mean, I think part of the age group of middle school kids is kids are getting to know themselves differently than they knew themselves before.
I think we all realize that up here because majority of us, I guess we all have kids that have gone through there, are going to go through there, and have been through there. So again, going back, what as an administration are you going to try to do to foster a culture at Scranton to move things forward, I guess?
So I guess I struggle a little bit though because I don't know what moving things forward really means, but we have the...
Well, better than it is now, let me say that. How's that?
So we have the WEP program in place to support our...
That's been in place for a while now.
Right. I'm just trying to figure out exactly what you're after, Bill, and you keep cutting me off every time I start to speak. So we have the WEP program in place to help build culture as 7th graders begin at Scranton Middle School. So that's kind of the first step in that trajectory, is to help out with that. We have an advisory period that we implemented last year where we have kids coming in. They've got a group of about, each teacher has a group of about 20 students. Every adult in the building has an advisor group. I have a group, Jen has a group, the counselors have a group. So we've moved into those smaller groups in order to help to build that culture and help people to feel, help kids to feel like they have an avenue or an outlet where they have somebody they can talk to.
You could say that building the STEAM center too is one of the huge efforts towards the academic portion.
From the academic portion. And that's, I don't know how you define culture is what I'm struggling with. I don't know if I'm talking academic culture.
And again,
personal
I said
culture.
culture for a reason because I'm trying to separate it from the academic side of it. Because, again, from the fact that Scranton is, again, these in-between years, as I'll call them, and I'm trying to, these kids need an identity, they need to, be something different than the J-Pubs, or the, whatever the heck they're called over there, okay? And I'm trying to figure out what is that going to be and how is that going to move forward with the way you're trying to move the academic forward at Scranton. And I think they both go hand in hand.
So I would say to you that our focus may be misplaced. You'll have to tell me. Our focus right now is very strongly on a couple of aspects. Number one, to make sure that our kids, when they leave middle school, are academically prepared for the high school experience, that they have the tools to be successful. Number two, at the middle level, we want to make sure that the middle years become something that kids feel good about. And we feel super good that the kids we just surveyed and the parents we just surveyed, that our highest rate of return of positive comments was in the area of meeting the social and emotional needs, which is what I think you're referring to as culture. Them feeling good about themselves, them feeling good about their experience, questions like there was an adult in the building who cared about me, those types of things we work really hard on to build that cultural piece with the kids. We've tried really hard over the last 7 years that I've been there to work on the culture between kids. So I can very distinctly remember my first year at Stratton, the term SETIs, and the idea that 8th graders and 7th graders were against each other and they could never mix, and there were separate passing times and separate lunch times and all of that. We've moved way beyond that at Scranton, where we now have a mentorship program where 8th graders are taking care of 7th graders and nurturing that relationship. And during class year, all of our electives are across grade level. All of our lunches are across grade level. They pass at the same time. We don't have huge issues with fighting and violence in the school and things like that. So there's a lot of those pieces in there that I think are the culture. When I think of culture, Bill, that's what I think of is those types of pieces. We continue to focus on that on a regular basis. We're having meetings, we call them chalk talks, where we invite, over the course of last summer and this summer, Jen and I will put topics out there to staff, and we send an email out with a calendar that says, hey, we're going to be talking about this, on this particular day at this particular time. Come in and join us if you want to. And some of those conversations are about the social and the emotional needs of kids with kids, as well as some conversations about STEAM and other things. So, you know, it's always on our radar screen. I guess and this is where I'm saying, you might disagree with the next statement I'm going to make. I feel like we always at this grade level need to focus on meeting the social and emotional needs of kids because they're at a very difficult time in their life where hormones are going crazy. And I mean, it's what I love about middle school kids, and it's what many people love about not being near middle school kids, right? So I think it's important to always keep that in mind. I think at this moment in time, while we need to continue to monitor that, it's probably not the most pressing issue that we're dealing with as a school because the community is telling us, you're doing pretty well here, but you really need to focus some energy here as well, which would be the academic rigor.
Okay, thanks.
Just, I want to thank and recognize the administration bringing you up here right now and really trying to tackle this next iteration of what Scranton is going to be and wants to be. It's certainly no easy task, and I think all of us up here collectively recognize that with a lot of moving parts. So, you know, I want to thank all of you for the time and energy you put in this summer and what it's going to take in the coming year. I think the student roundtable is certainly something that's got a lot of value, and I would say that that can play into student culture to a large degree if we truly listen to what they're saying. The only suggestion I have, or recommendation, would be to look at extending that student roundtable, and I'm not suggesting it needs to be, you know, some continuous cycle, but even going to the seniors, juniors, sophomores, and freshmen and get their perspective on what their experience at Scranton was and what their expectations would be today versus what it was then. And really listening to what they have to say. I always find it amazing when you pull a student group together and you really don't try to solve the problem with what they're saying rather than listening. And there's some real golden nuggets that come out of that and things that, you know, we as adults don't necessarily even think about from their perspective. So I think getting that perspective from, you know, our seniors and backwards can give some really good insight, because every one of those kids is coming out of that school, or almost every one of those kids is coming out of that school within the last, you know, 4 or 5 years. So just a suggestion, and even some parents as well, in terms of what their expectations were leaving and where you're trying to go. So thank you. Yep.
Just have a question, Mr. Wilson. I'd like to just briefly touch on facilities. And I know you're early in the process, but I'm wondering if you have, as you've been working through the evolution of the STEAM process and what you envision for Scranton, if you've looked at, from a long-term perspective, the adequacy of the existing facilities, or looking at what you would envision that would be beneficial to change or expand, or anything that could be modified with regard to the existing facilities that would help facilitate the growth or meet the actual needs from a long-term perspective of the STEAM initiative at Scranton. So maybe you haven't had a chance to look at that thoroughly, but I'd like to hear your comments if you have.
Sure, we've actually talked a lot about that. I think short-term, our media center space is going to serve us fairly well for the first year or so of our implementation of STEAM. When you look at STEAM schools, one of the things that they did is kind of a customer piece of all of them is a STEAM center, an area where kids can really go in and there's equipment there that they can use and explore and build and create and imagine and all of that in that particular space. We don't really have that space at Scranton right now. We do have a conventional wood shop that could easily be converted into that STEAM center concept. I think the challenge that lies before Scranton as I look, 3 to 5 years in the future is that's a space that, as the orchestra program is coming up, we've also talked about moving the orchestra program into that room and making that into a music room. So I think that Scranton is probably short one classroom, one large classroom space when it comes to the STEAM center concept and an orchestra program converging on the same site. I think that's a longer term problem because I think that, again, the media center space will probably serve us well for a year or two. But into the future, I think we will be needing to look at that. There is a courtyard right off the back of the school between a set of classrooms and kind of where the home economics and tech at the classroom sits. That might be an area that, as the board and as the administration is looking at future site plans and such, we might want to have some conversation about that and whether or not that would make sense to create a STEAM center in. But I don't think it's a burning bush at the moment. I just think that it's something worth keeping our eyes on.
I just don't want to be the only one to say it. I applaud you for everything you've done. You did a lot of hard work over the summer. I'm just curious, and I know we got here at some point, but is there any type of academic data at the high school in the freshman year that puts an exclamation point on problems that are coming out of Scranton? Or what are those? What kind of, just a reminder?
Yeah, honestly, kind of the data out of the high school, when we just looked at letter grades, we were extremely, extremely happy because generally speaking, you see about, this is a statistic only from my own experience of working in other districts, around a 15 to 20% failure rate when kids move from the middle school to the high school. Transitions are hard for kids. I know we got Liz here tonight. I'm sure Canton has a similar situation. I mean, it's like that just tends to be the case with kids. Transitions are hard. In moving from Scranton Middle School to Brighton High School, again, it was less than 10% of our kids are having A, D, or E on their report card, which is crazy good. And the percentages were closer to 5 and 6 in every area but English. English was the one that was hitting us at like 8 or 9% going from memory. But the others were in that 3 to 6% range, which is crazy, crazy small. So it really wasn't until we started peeling that onion back a little bit further and started asking the right questions that we started to get that, well, maybe it's just too easy then, right? Like maybe we just need to push them harder because if they're being that successful, what do they know that we didn't even know they knew when they left us becomes the next logical question.
On that note of when we talked about the 9th grade survey, this 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade also coming up is also an important survey to determine what the parents are looking for and what the kind of, when we did a survey here one day, it really helped because parents said, we talked about integration in the industry, we talked about some other things, and just looking at, not that you can change everything, but it never hurts to get the opinion and you collectively look at your 9th grade kids to go back and look at 6th and 7th and how it's all merging together. Are we setting on any 3D printers yet? 3D CAD programs? Well, we're deficient in that part, I'll tell you. So in our we'll call it our temporary STEAM center, I would make a strong recommendation when school opens this year to have one running. Okay? And it's just, we're behind times. And when it comes up, and that's kind of Mr. Trombley's, I got what I was thinking. The culture change is really part of it, is addressing these things where the students are ahead of us already. They already have them home. They're already doing things at home, doing projects. We've got a need to take the ones that are going this direction, and find places that they're going to be successful. And this is another part of the whole idea. I know you guys are working on it. I can hear everything you're doing. I can hear it, and I really am positive that it's going in the right direction, and we're looking at these opportunities because there's an opportunity to do so. If we didn't have the budget to do so, we'd have to be different. We have a little more flexibility. And what I would recommend is throwing those things in there as soon as possible, just to get the beginning. Because if we don't start, when do we start? Wait for 3 years? No, I don't think we need to. I would suggest that we budget for it and take some experimental chances. Remember, in my industry, in automotive, we use a lot of what we experimented with, but some of it we never use again. So we can't be afraid to try it, see what the effect is and how it works for us. And if it doesn't work for us, know that it was an investment, and we set it aside to work on the next best thing, which we learned usually from what we didn't use, we learned something else. And I think for us going forward in education, we're in need of that in our state, in our town. And I think you guys are very talented, obviously, we're very talented people. But again, sometimes you have to be empowered. I heard a lot of times, well, we just can't do that because we didn't know we had the freedom to do that. I will suggest to you that between this board and everybody, come with an idea, I think you'll get 100% support. And if it didn't work out, nobody's going to be in trouble. You use your best effort and give it all you got, and we'll see how it helps the kids. So look forward to seeing the new science programs going in and all the things that you've already done. And this is just a icing on the cake kind of, because what we have going is good. Like you said, your results have been successful. They're not just successful, they're actually above any average that we've seen, correct? You look at other schools, you're saying we're hitting it pretty good. Now, what do we do to make it a little better? And I'm proud to be part of seeing what you're doing, so keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that moves us into board action for this evening. Item A, meeting minutes of July 25th, 2018. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Chesney, supported by Mr. Stahl. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? That passes 6-0. Don't disagree. Item B, therapy dog donation, multi. Dr. Gray.
We recommend you accept the following donation of $1,000 from Ravago Manufacturing. That is per our board policy 7230. We reached out to them last time you asked us to, and what they wanted you to know is they were just kind souls that want to help kids. That was their response.
That's a good response.
I thought so too.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Chesney. Support. Supported by Mr. Myers. You guys are fighting over it, or what? Go ahead. Any discussion? Okay, or all those in favor of accepting the donation from Ravago Manufacturing with great appreciation? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? Passes 6-0. Item C, hiring of certified staff. Dr. Gray.
We recommend that you accept the recommendations to hire the teachers below: Jessica Gus, Samantha Punter, Mindy Halligan, Rebecca Hawkins, Rebecca Goy, Daniel Grills, and Nathan Nicholson. Again, we spent a lot of time this summer, a lot of interviewing committees. A lot of people have given up time when they didn't have to come in and work. And we feel very, very good about this crop of people that we're bringing in to replace, obviously, stars that we lost that had worked here a long time. So we're going to, in the end, we'll end up with about 15 new teachers, a couple new administrators, and we're really excited about their future here. We think they're going to do wonderful things for our kids, so we recommend them highly.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve? So moved by Mr. Stahl.
Second.
Supported by Dr. Chesney. Any discussion?
Are any of the certified staff here today? So
I was going to say, if anybody's here, please stand up.
welcome to Brighton Area Schools.
So I think we have Jessica and we have Nathan.
Yes.
Yes, great.
All right. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Nays, passes 6-0. Welcome aboard. Congratulations. Item D, Neola policy, second reading. Dr. Gray.
We have the normal, and this was late spring, obviously, Neola policy that we went through. It's 0140, 1421, 1321, 4121, 4162, 5111, 7540.02, and 8321. I haven't received any questions in relation to these, and we would recommend that you accept these as we present.
We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Chesney, supported by Mr. Conley. Any discussion?
Are there any substantive changes or modifications?
Most of them are legal changes.
I just had, Dr. Gray, one question on page 57. There was a reference in the margin to MyStar that may or may not be impacted. It was a handwritten notation. Do you know what that really
Yeah,
is?
He's identifying what my star is a portion of this particular paragraph. So the technology ones I hand over to Dr. Turner, and Dr. Turner screens them against our existing policies. So created content, apps, and services, including personal website pages to be used to post student. You can also post stuff through MyStar. And so we wanted to include MyStar because it's a venue that our teachers use on a consistent basis.
So one thing I know we've talked about previously, can we get, when we get these Neola policies, can we get an executive summary that gives us the highlights of what's changed in each section? And that way then, from a reference perspective, we know what we're comparing to?
That'd be great. Tonight Officer Burks is here, and saw us kind of a mention online regarding the policy hands-ons, and I was touching on what was discussed. So what's our policy on that?
Our policy is, I'm trying to think of the number, 72, I don't know, I put it in your Friday letter. No, it's not in this policy. We checked our policy, and at this point, we don't have to change.
So it's the same as we approved last year?
Yep.
So Officer Burks knows what it is? He's familiar with it?
Yes, he's familiar with the restrictions.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 6-0. Item E, VESPA tentative agreement. Dr. Gray.
You know, for E and F, I would say, again, thank you, Mr. Trombley, and the other people that have helped us work through these particular TAs. The first one is our TA with VESPA, the second, obviously, with BASA. You have obviously the specifics in relation to that. I haven't received any questions. I do know that both of these passed the memberships at 100%, and we had very good sessions when we sat down.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve VESPA tentative agreement? Support by Mr. Myers, supported by Mr. Trombley. Any discussion?
Question. Dr. Gessinger, what is the cost of the district for these contracts? The increases in these contracts compared to last year's budget?
Each of them are approximately $50,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those, well, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to ask, I know John sent an email requesting some information. Did you receive that financial information?
I was going to ask when you come to board.
Got it. Okay.
All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 6-0. Item F, BASA tentative agreement.
I would say the same recommendation as VESPA.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Stahl,
Second.
seconded by Dr. Chesney. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 6-0. Item G, certified hire. Dr. Gray.
We'd ask that you approve the new hires vacancy due to staff retirements. As you see below, Van Hurtado, Scott Story, and Heather Graves, with their obvious distinctions behind.
We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Myers,
Second.
seconded by Dr. Chesney. Any discussion?
I have a question. I'm always curious about the point two for Spanish. What does that mean?
So it's an area that we have to cover. We don't have enough people to cover it because it might expand one way or the other. It happens a lot in foreign language for us, and so it's 1 hour that we have to cover. Because if you think about a 1.0, and if a teacher's mandated to teach 5 out of their 6 hours during the day, a 1.0 would mean they taught 5 of the classes at a 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. So if we have to bring somebody in to cover, and I believe this one's at the elementary, Mr. Vecchione, it's tied to shared service as well in the offerings that we have.
Spencer Elementary School.
Yeah, Spencer, so we have to cover that with a 0.2.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 6-0. Item H, administrative hire. Dr. Gray.
I received a recommendation from the high school administration and their interview team to approve Ms. Jennifer Spryce-Kellner as grade level principal at Brighton High School. hopefully effective after today if you approve the recommendation. She presently is a guidance counselor looking to move into that administrative role and really work with us not only at 2 grade levels but also in the social emotional piece of that particular building.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Myers, supported by Mr. Stahl. Any discussion?
I simply like to say it's always great to see someone who's worked their way up through their own districts. She started with us in '91. Great success there. Congratulations.
It took so long, Jennifer, where you been? The other thing I'd like to compliment her on is we've known Jennifer and Ms. Bryce Teller since I was teaching 5th grade at Hilton, and it goes back a lot of years. My daughter's 27 now, right? 26. But to see continued work within our school system, we're fortunate to have her. She continues, from everything I've seen, I recall the exceptional teaching experience. I think it took a year or 2 for Scranton to catch up with the work they've done in the 5th grade sometimes. They organized very well. And then also, not that long ago, I sat in her office and she was at full capacity and we talked about this cooperative learning. And I think we had 0 at the time, pretty close. And she said, you know, I'll do what I can. And I see this down here that we're building and, you know, we may not have I think I asked for 200 kids by the first year, if I recall.
That day?
That day. Yeah, I did. I found a mechanic I'd like to see. I want to fix it right now. But I've seen steady progress and versus no, you know, saying that this can't happen or making it happen. So in that, obviously it's been a great part to be on the board to see these successes for Brighton students in these last many years. So look forward to seeing your next position and what you can do there. And obviously my support, they'll be here forever, but I'll be done on the board by the end of this year. But I can suggest to this board that my experience working with you has been exceptional and that they could support anything you brought to me. So I know that now, and then in case I'm not here, little birdie's talking in here and Bryce Teller's in front of me for some reason. I say absolutely yes and just do what she needs. And like I said, great. I can tell you that my daughter is now in a U of M program, a master's. She relates back to experiences she had back in that grade at different times of professionalism. And it stays with these students. And it can be in middle school. We're talking about what we're offering coming up in the middle school for the students. It can be in our high school. It can be in the grade school. The teachers do make an impact, and administrative staff make a huge impact for our kids. So keep up the hard work. Well, thank you.
Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes 6-0. Congratulations. And item I, Assistant Superintendent, Dr. Gray.
We would recommend that you approve the hire of Ms. Elizabeth Moser as Assistant Superintendent of Instructional Services effective, again, hopefully tomorrow. Ms. Moser will fill the vacancy of recently retired Dr. Suri. The selection committee, which I think Dr. Chesney is going to talk a little bit about, made a recommendation of 2 finalist candidates to us. And then at central office, we did the final round of interviews and came to a complete agreement on Ms. Moser. So we're excited to have her, hopefully once you vote her in, and we think she's just poised to do unbelievable stuff for us.
Do we have is she here tonight?
Right in front of her.
Hello. Hi. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. Support.
Moved by Dr. Chesney, supported by Mr. Conley. Any discussion?
By way of introduction, first, welcome. Well, let me say tentatively welcome, because we haven't voted yet. But you've gone through quite a process, and I want to describe the process because I think it was exemplary. And I want to give Mr. Vecchione a lot of credit for running a solid process on this. But we started off with about 45 candidates, and there was a committee of 3 that narrowed it down to the most critical 7 choices. And then there was a committee of 10 people, and the committee of 10 was made up of administrators, and that was Mr. Vecchione, Mr. Bean, Dr. Turner, and Ms. Bredlow. There were the academic coaches involved in the room, there were a couple of parents, and then there was a single board member. And that narrowed the 7 really, really solid candidates down to 2. And then Dr. Gray and Dr. Gistinger met with the final 2 candidates and made a wonderful, wonderful choice. So it was a very, very well-run, very solid process, but that's the process. Now let's talk about the person. So and this is from the brief time that we spent together and then being involved in the committee. I just wanted to say this is what I've seen so far. So I've seen an exceptionally motivated person. I've seen a person who's willing to be creative in the academic endeavor. One thing that I noticed, and this is from the materials that you gave us, is that you're very process driven. And that over time will be particularly well appreciated by the board, and I'm sure by all of the teachers, by the whole staff who works at Brighton area schools. Ms. Mosier is competitive, which I don't think is a small thing. Having a little bit of competitiveness, like my understanding is that she's one heck of a tennis player, so that's a good thing. Ms. Mosier also has, in addition to an outstanding academic background, also has a little bit of a marketing background. Okay, and part of the point of what we do is to educate our youth. Being able to tell people that we're educating our youth in a positive way isn't a small thing. So having that ability and that in your back pocket is also a wonderful set of skills. I find her to be very enthusiastic. I find her to be exceptional, a real leader, and the experience that she has as Director of Secondary Education in Plymouth, Canton, and Huron Valley, there's absolutely no question in my mind that this careful process and picking the right person is going to result in wonderful benefits for Brighton area schools. So I'm absolutely thrilled.
Does that mean you're voting for her?
I'm thinking yes.
Any other, thank you, Dr. Chesney. Okay, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye. Enthusiastically aye.
Any nays? Passes 6-0. Welcome aboard. It's great to have you. You want to come sit up here now?
I'll wait the sign.
Okay. Fair enough.
Smart woman.
Real quickly, I want to thank Dr. Chesney for the time commitment that was put in leading this search overall. I know that we did some things a little bit differently in this process, and I think the process played out is exactly how we wanted to. So thank you for the additional time and energy that was certainly expended to find such a great candidate, and we're excited to bring Ms. Mosier on board. So thank you.
You're welcome, and I give a lot of credit to Mr. Vecchione too for he was the driver behind this whole thing. So thank you, Mr. Vecchione.
All right, thank you. Okay, that takes us out of for action and into for future action. We only have one item this evening. Item A, leave of absence request.
In a couple weeks, we'll request that you approve the leave request of Holly Allen, who's a 3rd grade teacher with 5 years of experience in the district. She is requesting a 1-year unpaid leave of absence for 18-19, and we have factored in her replacement if you choose to move forward.
Okay. Any questions? All right. That will move us out of for future action and into board committee reports and Board of Education bulletins. Mr. Stahl.
Facilities committee, we did have a facilities committee meeting centered around the bond proposal, CT building dome, also covered school safety. Gathered some information, a lot more gathered. We got stuff like, we had Mr. Blau there, who we all know runs our robotics. He talked about the size of the area that he would need to have his, what do you call that? It's not his field. So that kind of tells you what kind of numbers you're looking at for that particular area. And there's discussions with teachers about whether or not we should move closer to that area that we'd be building, whether or not we should include other sciences. We had gotten a discussion going, and they went off in another room with Gavin and discuss more, so I'm still waiting to connect with them, get that information. They're a little busy right now, school started and whatnot. But I'm planning on having a couple more of these. I'd like to have a little more information on what the ideas are with the teachers and with their sports programs as far as the dome idea. I plan to get as much information I can. Thank you for asking about what Scranton's needs to be, because that's kind of part of what I want to do. Because we've discussed, whether or not we should be doing things in the hall. So this is the kind of information I'm trying to gather with these meetings. I hope to have a lot more for you. We're going to another one set up for the 24th. I've got a couple private meetings with people in between. I can make those. And I'll bring all that information to you and tell you what we have. That's what we have.
Okay.
We've got a schedule together too. Dr. Gray, speaking to that schedule, we put together what our anticipation is to get ready for one.
So when will the next bond vote potentially be?
What was it, next one?
Back a few weeks ago, yeah, Dr. Chesney, we had a finance committee meeting and we discussed stuff we could do maybe before the bond request, if we could get some things ramped up, potentially for the Virgil Turner School. And we just talked a minute ago, regarding maybe things we can do at Scranton. We mentioned 3D printers and basic things. But I had asked for a lot of money for the bridge, not thinking I'd get it all. And as we got whittled down to not getting very much, if we get anything at all. And so I had a question for Dr. Gessinger on fund equity. And that question was, what exactly makes up fund equity again? Tell me how, because there's some rules that govern what we call fund equity. It's not cash in the bank apparently. So tell me about fund equity.
Okay.
You say we have $5 million in fund equity, but if I ask for $800,000, I can't get a check for $800,000. How come?
Okay, so fund equity is the net worth of the organization. So the easiest way to describe that is to think about your own personal net worth. So your net worth may be X amount, but it isn't all cash, right? So you have property, you have brokerage accounts, you have other real estate, you have your vehicles, the contents of your home. These are all things that would add up on the asset side of your balance sheet. Again, not all cash. Then you subtract your liabilities. Perhaps you have a mortgage payment or a car payment, maybe some commercial debt. You would subtract that from your assets. What's left over is your net worth. And if you're running the numbers right, hopefully that's a positive number. And in our district, that amount is $5 million. So again, fund equity is the component of your assets, but it's not all cash, and you have to subtract what you owe off of it.
Okay, so but on our balance sheet, if our balance sheet says we have $5 million in fund equity. Now, school, because I've been, it's going back and forth whether it's a business or not, like I have, and I have a balance sheet that has all those things on it, very simply spelled out, but spelled out compared to what we have here in the school district with over 1 million square feet of property or building space. So then how much money do we have? How much cash do we have?
It depends from period to period, but typically we're sitting on anywhere between $1 million and $3 million in cash at any time, depending on our payroll cycle.
Okay, so then again, when we look at, we just offered a 2% raise and it would cost us $50,000 per employment group, right? It was $50,000 additional to what we're already spending. Would that include benefits and everything, that $50,000?
That is right.
Okay, so we spent $100,000 basically out of the general fund, which then technically from our cash account standpoint per year will lower the cash account balance, which would impact fund equity to a point to
That's right.
$1,000. Okay. So I have not really an issue, but I do have a concern that fund equity then is derived off of an estimated amount in some areas, be it value of property, be it value of land, be it if these are being considered for values, those are subject to change with a graph. So I'm listening. So
Okay.
in that, how do we appraise a building to say that's
Sure.
part of our fund equity?
So the interesting thing about the way that governmental entities run their accounting records is that no long-term debt and no long-term assets actually hit your balance sheet. And the reason for that is because we are a not-for-profit organization. And it's not as if we have dump trucks and factories and things like that, equipment, that we would put into service to generate revenue for the organization. So it's not as if I can sell our school buildings or our school buses or any of those things to generate revenue. So for that reason, our long-term assets and long-term liabilities are kept off of our balance sheet. So when we refer to our fund balance, we are speaking only of our short-term assets and our short-term liabilities. Our long-term assets and liabilities are accounted for in a separate note in our financial statements, and they only show up on our government-wide balance sheet when we prepare government-wide balance sheets. Now, interestingly enough, this all came about in the early 2000s when the SB 34 was implemented, and we had to go about and value our assets and put them on our books. Most districts turned up with a negative net position because most districts are sitting on 100-year-old or 50-year-old buildings that are essentially depreciated to zero, yet there's hundreds of thousands of debt on the books, hundreds of millions of debt on the books to keep these facilities updated and to keep them moving in the right direction.
Okay, so some of these short-term assets would be?
So our short-term assets, so the balance sheet, it's like a merry-go-round, or like I always think like musical chairs, right? We keep going, the music keeps playing. Eventually, the music stops, everybody has to sit in the chair. When does the music stop? June 30th. And that's when everybody has to find a chair. So we only really measure our net worth once a year on June 30th. So on June 30th, the state of Michigan owes us state aid for July and August. And it is our biggest non-cash short-term asset on our balance sheet. And it's about $5 million that the state owes us on June 30th. We collected in July and August. Interestingly enough, our largest short-term liability on our balance sheet is the accrual of our salaries and benefits that we owe to our teachers in July and August. So they have concluded their work at the end of the school year, yet they've worked an entire contractual year, and we pay them through the summer so that they can balance their cash flow. So we save a little bit back from their paycheck every time we pay them so that we can spread it over the summer. If they were to quit, we still owe them that money because they've concluded their work at the end of June or the middle of June. So that is our longest short-term liability, largest on our balance sheet. And what the state owes us for our state aid typically offsets that short-term large liability.
So we're showing that money that's owed to us on the books, but we haven't yet received it.
That's right.
But we're still showing it as a positive balance.
That's right. It's an asset because they will pay us because.
I got it, no, I got it, it's coming. So the question then is that really, so in the fund equity position, when we advertise the fund equity amount, this is a standard operating procedure for all school districts.
That is exactly right. We follow generally accepted accounting principles governed by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board.
Obviously, it passes
Every
the audit.
school district follows the same rules. It's job security.
Right. Well, obviously, we pass our audits with a
That's right.
100%. Okay, so, but it's an understanding though, by myself and the board, just because you say there's $5 million in fund equity doesn't mean there's $5 million in cash.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Can we borrow on it?
We do a line of credit, but it's not on our fund balance. It's on our bond rating and our cash flow projections, not on our fund equity.
So technically, if we had a project that we knew we had money coming in down the road, we could fund it with our line of credit. We didn't need it to pay for payroll.
Can you give a specific example?
Sure, the 800,000 I went to the bridge.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
So we would actually have to disclose that because the reason why we have a line of credit is for cash flow purposes. So let's say we were going to veer off the plan and we were going to detour $800,000 into a project, we would have to disclose that in our borrowing. Not saying that it couldn't happen, it's fairly unconventional, but we are not a conventional district.
Who says we're conventional?
That's
We have
right.
15 million in shared service money coming in gross numbers.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's an exceptional opportunity, but I'm just saying, just so we don't have to keep putting it off. So whether it was in Bridge, whether it was something in high school, whether it was something at Scranton Middle School, I'm suggesting that you get your credit would be enough, that you have a line of credit that you can use when needed,
That's right.
and you have it produced for payroll in case you run out of.
And remember, the line of credit, or when we used to borrow, is based on a timing factor of when we get state aid payments.
Expanding that idea.
Yep.
And
So-
our
so-
bond rating is excellent, so we are very borrow worthy. We are in really good shape financially.
Well, that puts you in the driver's seat.
That's exactly right.
Instead of saying we can't do something, we have the opportunity to do something. So instead of having a $2.5 million line of credit, maybe we need a $5 million line of credit because you show the ability to pay it back. Just an idea. Instead of saying no and putting it down the road a year or two or not happening, if you have the funding coming in, you know, it's again, they build it, they will come. You know, hey, it really is true. And we've been so fortunate to continue this development. I'm just looking at anything I can do to.
Do you want us to look into that deeper? I've never heard this type of, I don't know Dr. Gissinger, but I've never heard this type of idea. But
Just a little in the can,
willing
trying
to
to get along.
look deeper into it if you'd like.
If we were for-profit, it would be a piece of cake. This is the exact reason that small businesses borrow all the time.
I talked to our senior vice president of the bank today and discussed the project, so the idea is it's fresh in my mind to think about.
Okay.
And then in case.
We'll do some checking and report back.
Because we're a year away from applying and possibly asking, possibly this time, and agreed on that it's going, but there'll be a bond next November. But in the situation that it doesn't happen, or in the working up to it, there may be a way to get more things done and accomplished before we get there. And
Another vehicle also would be a sinking fund as well. We could save up our sinking fund dollars and engage in the construction of a project like that.
But if we get one passed, I would support it, you know, we talked about this before, obviously, years ago, it didn't get reapplied for us. Maintenance is necessary 24/7, every single day. So, we know that, so I don't know where the word's at. I think that's a realistic thing to ask the public for, and get it in place. But again, it's, everybody here has to agree. So thank you, I think those are great answers, and I appreciate your time.
So correct me if I'm wrong, do you want to raise taxes?
Well, you're gonna raise them one way or the other. So, if you're gonna do a bond, or you're gonna do a sinking fund, or you may do both. The issue is that there's a cost to run this industry, and we know that there's a cost to it. As long as the board has proven, which it has proven, to be responsible to do that, I don't have a problem with it. But remember, the city of Brighton, the school system, everybody is looking at opportunities where they need more money to fix roads. I mean, parking lot, that was the other thing. You look at a foot of asphalt or whatever, it has tripled in 10 years. It's like ridiculous. Everything costs more, and it's not fair. It isn't fair, because there's folks, I was at a board meeting in the city of Brighton, the guy stood up and said, I get $1,100 a month in my income every month. He was a veteran. He said, that's all I get. I live in the city of Brighton. I can't afford it anymore. He honestly can't. That's it. I'm going to move him out of his town, move him out of his house he's lived in since he was born. That's not a fair thing to do, so we'd be very cautious now taxes, because he's not in the same income what we are, and we're still building careers and going and have, you know, we just hired a top-notch superintendent of curriculum that's working hard to get to this point. We went through how many people to interview. Okay, I mean, a phenomenal opportunity, and for us as well. But a lot of folks aren't there. So we put tax on them for a school that they don't get any benefit from. And that's what he said. My roads are fine. I don't need to worry about the tax downtown. Why are you going to give me $4.5 million on my taxes? I think that's what they're asking for, isn't it? Something like that. It was a ton. And so anyhow, so we should think about that. But again, the school system, yeah, let's see what's available. And I think we should discuss all options regarding what we're going to do for the going forward in the maintenance of the school system. So any one of us aren't here and this thing's in place. We don't want to have to go back through anything. There's no need for crises. Plan for it. And I agree with it. So thank you again for your good answers. Oh, do we want to talk about finance meeting? Yep. I do have one. All right.
Just a couple of things. One is the Technology Innovation Grant, and this is a big thanks to Dr. Chris Turner. We just went through, the committee went through all of the proposals, and those will shortly be coming up and being announced. So the 2018-19 academic year equipment will hopefully be purchased and be ready to rock by the beginning of the school year. So that's one thing, the Technology Innovation Grant for the upcoming year. And this is a couple of questions for the retreat, the next retreat that we have. I can't remember exactly when it's scheduled, but a couple of questions that I'd like to have on there.
September 12th.
September 12th, so September 12th. One of the questions is, what would be Brighton area schools' desired organization structure? And just, we've talked about this, we've had a couple of new hires are talking about this position of the HR director. It's just if we were building a dream organization, what would it look like? And just to talk about it. And is it the same as it exists right now, or what might that look like? And then, so that's one of the questions. And then another question that I'd like on there, and this is about the committees that we have. A question that I'd like to discuss at that is, should the committees be meeting as needed or as scheduled? And just the idea of meeting when there is, some direct need based upon some current events that are going on in the school district, rather than because there happens to be a meeting scheduled for Thursday night at 4:30. So I think that's a conversation that we should have with retreat.
Did you got both of those in second? Great.
But
Make sure we get them on the agenda. Yep.
I'd also like to add to that same last comment, the people that are running the meetings now, the right people to have running the meetings in the future.
Okay. We'll look at committees as a whole as an agenda item in the next retreat on the 12th. More.
Henry, we have a thing coming up on the 20th for information for students regarding vape pipes. Is that right? What's that all about?
Yeah, Vape 101, we ran a program last year, John. We present the really bad stuff about vaping, and it's going to be at 7 o'clock on Monday the 20th, I believe it's 6 o'clock. And all our athletes are required to attend.
Okay. What about everybody else?
We open it up to everybody else, but our athletes are actually required to attend.
Okay. And that's, I go back to, it's a problem throughout the entire school system. I got a phone call on it. Specifically, it was geared towards athletes.
No, we ran it last year, Vape 101 for the entire community.
Okay.
We had a pretty decent turnout for doing that. This year, though, we believe because of, again, I'm not trying to stereotype an athlete. It's like the old shoe back in the day. They seem to be a little more popular on athletes. We have some control over that group. So each season, John just told me we're going to run Vape 101 for each of our athletic seasons. All of our teams must walk through that. And it's open still to the public all 3 times.
Okay. And what are we doing in general then for the general? Do we have an auditorium? Will we fill everybody in high school in the auditorium and have the same session during school? Or do we have what's our plan for that?
We talk about our health class, it's part of our health curriculum. And if kids are caught vaping, we have them go through an educational program.
Cessation.
So I'd like to follow on to Mr. Conley's question, because I think this gets to the comment of the discussion we had in the last board meeting about equity and making sure that we're creating consistency across the district. This is another example of, here we're forcing, and again, I'm completely supportive of this. This makes all the sense in the world. But we're telling our athletes, you have to do this, yet the rest of our students, they're under our control 8 hours a day, every day, 5 days a week. So I think we need to come up with some mechanism, whether it be pulling them all into the auditorium at various sessions, something where this course or this topic is being discussed and it's in front of them across the board.
I'll explore it. I think it's 4-7 is begging to explore that.
I would also bring this to everyone's attention, our board, including our audience. We all know we have a big problem with this. And we also know that they're gearing for our middle school kids and our grade school kids. They have, bubble gum flavored this. They have, and what they have is an increasing amount of nicotine you can purchase. You can buy a 10%, a 20%, a 50%. This is a really big deal. This is the next, because it's a gateway. The nicotine addiction and what goes on with nicotine, what everybody has to get the next high, right? So we're in a position of leadership, not in a position of following. And because we're in a position of leadership, we have to act now because we know it's a problem. It's not later, it's not next year, it's not 2 years from now. It's immediate intervention to stop it wherever we can stop it. And then, let's say we keep a few kids from this year from going down that road. Okay, I know some really good students that got popped and Henry had to suspend them. Don't keep it in me. Just check. I don't think I'm timed up here, but if that happens, is it midnight yet? So, so I know that, I know Henry had to expel some students, you know, for this stuff that, you know, got big suspensions. And some that come back to school, had to leave our school, came back. I know the students personally, and they're successful young people now. We handled it the best we could, but obviously it would be something, if you didn't have to deal with it, it would be way better not dealing with it. And we have, you know, I have these things in front of me that, you know, addiction to Apple's, you know, iPhones, you know, and I have these others, and we're facing all these things, which leads me to things I'm not going to talk about regarding what happens with distracted driving. And we don't want it to happen. There are kids, and once you've raised, even if you haven't had a child, if you raised a family and you realize how important they are, they're very important. So, back to our best abilities. It's our job as a board, our job with our professional staff, to come up with ways to intervene. And I mean, as quick as possible. Officer Parks is back there. He's only one man. He has to handle 6,000 students here. But we have a principal in the middle school that's very upbeat, open-minded to doing things. He's obviously very articulate, smart. He can design probably anything. So, I would put it to you, Mr. Wilson, the same thing. I would challenge you to develop, again, I know you're working on all these academic things, but it's also the safety security side. And the more we do, and it presents, everything else falls in place as well. If these things do them up front. I hate to even talk about it because of, it's one more thing for us to do and one more thing to worry about. And I know the schools do the best they can and have all these people and it's just all comes in it. But I would just think that there's got to be more. I don't know, Henry, you're an expert on this stuff now. So, sorry.
I don't want to be.
You are. You are. And you're as current as they come. And the rest of us, again, these guys have families in school. My kids are graduated. I don't have to deal with it. But, and I suppose next year or 5 years from now, it's going to be something else for sure. You know, there's a few years ago, they're in the stores taking stuff off the shelves of, you know, of liquor stores that the kids were buying. It's horrible stuff, right? So again, I take my hat off that we can continue to adapt. But I would just, I think we need to, yes, sir, go ahead.
I want to respond. I'm talking to Bruce's comment too. Will this Florida offering during the day, each grade level at the high school plus brings grand over as well? I think it's not that expensive. I don't think
We've done that, bro. I think that makes a lot of sense.
I don't care how expensive it is, Henry.
I'm
Don't worry about the money, I'm telling you.
talking about the logistics of it.
Don't worry about, I heard that expensive thing come out again. It doesn't matter to me. It's fine. It's whatever it costs. Bring it to the board. It costs what it costs. If we can approve it, we will. And Dr. Gessinger's got the checkbook. Okay, so, and that's fact. So I think that's the this board was open-minded to that. We got to face the facts right up front and not hide them. And I work with a lot of law enforcement. I'm proud of everything they're doing, but they really do need our support as well. Can't do it by themselves. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. One last thing this evening in this portion, and this is just a general reminder, Dr. Gray, I would ask that you get a message out to all staff as well, that it is election time of year once again, and it's up to all of us to make sure that we're aware of election rules and regulations that are out there and in place, so anything we can do to communicate that to staff, and also certainly for us as fellow board members, it's a good reminder to be cognizant of what you can and can't do and where the appropriate spaces are. Okay. That brings us to second call to the public. If anyone wishes to address the board this evening in second call, please step to the podium, and we ask that the same rules apply as in the first.
Hi, I have
702 State Street. Right. Thank you, Ms. Park, for that. That was just absolutely very touching to me, and I appreciate it. I just wanted to mention, I'm sure as government representatives, you're all aware of this, but for your person that you heard speaking at the city of Brighton, there are exemptions. There are poverty exemptions available to people if they are willing to show records that they're on a fixed income. You should know that. Very important civic thing to be able to pass on to people if they really are in need. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I'm listening to Mr. Wilson and his staff and all this innovation and Steve, and I'm listening to Mr. Connolly say that, you know, we really want innovation, don't be afraid to come up and, you know, bring things to us, we're gonna have your back, we're gonna support you. But, you know, one of the reasons that, you know, people don't innovate, particularly in government, is because, you know, sometimes there's too many chiefs. And when you have one particular person like trustee or treasurer Trombley, you know, just really constantly asking question after question, making a person feel like they're having their feet put to the fire, which happens pretty much anytime any person comes up to the board with an idea that's innovative. That discourages innovation. This is the very way in which government discourages innovation. That kind of thing doesn't happen in the private sector. It doesn't happen in nonprofit. But it does happen in a place in which there is an interest in making yourself look like the hero by holding other people's feet to the fire and being too committed to following some kind of rule book or some kind of what if this, what if that, what if this, how will we measure, what if we fail? I would like to see a little bit more positivity on the part of the board, particularly on the part of Trustee Trombley, when talking to professionals that work every day for our students to try to make them safe, to try to make them educated, and to try to improve on what they're doing. And I'm just afraid that when we do this kind of public scrutiny, and this kind of
Ms. Eikens, lastly, you wrap up your
yeah, you get the point. I don't want it to discourage innovation. We're doing great things. But, you know, I certainly wouldn't want to be questioned by Trustee Trombley. It might keep me from coming up with ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to address the board this evening?
My name is Alan Webb, 7591 Brighton Road, Brighton 48116. And at the last meeting, I brought up the need or want for a pedestrian crossing light at the high school. And I guess I'm wondering, or if I'm allowed to ask you if that process has been started to talk to the different townships and cities, or if this is something that you guys are on board with or making work of.
So I did make contact with the city. I was interested in the flashing sign type situation. I got a price on those. They're $4,500 a piece for install. Those seem to resonate more on the 6th Street than the further down in terms of that. And then obviously the concrete cost depends on the day, like Mr. Connolly was saying with asphalt. If you were to run a sidewalk from all the way down by the electric sign, all the way up to the sidewalk in the other place. So I do have, when we get quotes, we have to get 3. So I have 3 cement quotes coming back in terms of the width of what we need and those types of things. In terms of the management of the piece, it seemed like it was an easier, because there's already a median in the 6th Street. That's why we looked at the electronic signs there, people. And there are sidewalks from down by the electronic sign up to 6th Street, and then kids could cross. So we're looking at both those options right now, trying to explore which is best.
Okay, but then at the light, are you considering anything there then, over by the football field?
Possibly. Once we have all the information, you know, with the sidewalk cost and if you put it down by the light, are you gonna put it at 6th Street too? So then it kind of doubles your costs in terms of that. And so we're looking at all those options right now.
Thank you.
Yep. If you wanted to email me, I can contact you directly as we move through the process. Okay?
Thank you.
Wilson, I can send them to State Street renovation. There was talk today of isolating some of the more capable students in areas like science and mathematics so that they can teach classes, which I find to be a harmless claim, but regardless, the better option would be to isolate those students in a classroom in a sort of magnet, because right now we only have a geometry and an algebra for advanced mathematics, while we don't have things for science, history, honors, and AP classes, like not in the term of college credits, but in the term of, advanced learning should be available for middle school students as well as high school students. So it's just kind of I know it's a hard process, but it would be very nice to see at least a little bit of progress into higher learning for middle school students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ted Wagner. I teach at Scranton Middle School. I've taught 28 years and all of it's been at Scranton. So I've seen all the trends and all the new innovations and all the new things that have come up year after year in education, and I've seen quite a few when we start them. We run through it a couple of years and then it falls to the wayside and we kind of wait for what the next new big thing is going to be. In my 28 years, the most exciting one that I've seen was when we did PBL, project-based learning. Roughly 6 years ago, when the board at the time said, we need you to come up with a 7th period day, and Scranton did. Our extra 7th period was supplying every kid with 1 hour of project-based learning. We had about a quarter of the staff taught them how to do it, so the one person on each 4-person academic team then taught everybody, all the kids on their staff how to do PBL. Unfortunately, the next year, when given the option of going back to a 6-period day or keeping a 7, the staff voted for 6. And although a few of the teachers who were trained in it kept doing some of it to some degree in their class, PBL kind of fell to the wayside. It was kind of a neat thing. We had a hard time finding somebody in the state to teach it to us because it was kind of new at the time. I have 2 years left if I'm out to 30. I don't think I'll see another new big innovation. I didn't think I would, and then STEAM pops up. And we'd like to see that not only in my science curriculum that the 8th grade is using, and we're going to actually do it 6 through 8, but the talk of getting the whole building to do it. So I think that's great. I think this is going to be, it has so many things in common with PBL, and I think it's excellent. I'm excited to hear Mr. Conley say that there's hopefully money for it, and he wants to get technology in there that will help him. The only thing is the teachers then, though, have to know how to use that technology to implement it with STEAM.
True.
So, the technology part's great. The reason why I can still do PBL well is because I was trained in it and I've had years of experience in it. Dr. Chesney seemed to be asking, what do we need to make sure that the staff is successful with getting STEAM implemented? I don't think we're going to have a crash course of all the teachers being trained in STEAM before we start this year. There just isn't the time for it. When we walk in the first day of school, there's one person, as far as I know, who's taught years with STEAM, and nobody else. So I don't know if it's been discussed. I would hope it would have been discussed. If she is going to be the English teacher who we try to squeeze some STEAM time out of after school, which probably isn't the best time to be trying to get the staff to see how to implement this within the school year. But if instead we have the money to have an in-house coach,
Mr. Wagner, can you summarize your...
can I speed it up?
Yeah.
If we could have an in-house coach, that every hour of the day, instead of worrying about teaching her subject and then being responsible for helping the staff learn this, who can come in each of those prep periods where each academic team is meeting and help us through the year to see how we can actually implement it. I think that would be much better. Thank you.
Great, thank you. One question.
I'm allowed a question according to the president. So, imagine that, 8 years of this job. All right, so project-based learning. I recall approving it, and then I recall not disapproving it. So we're talking about a contractual obligation with our teachers that we fell flat on because we requested a 7-hour period. Can you fill me in on that? Why did it, if it worked, why did it fall flat? What happened? You can ask Mr. Wilson. Yeah, I guess that's his. Yeah, good, thank you. But your presentation was wonderful. I was going to give you my 3 minutes, but I'm not in the public. I like listening to people that are right up front and honest with what's going on. Yes, sir, Mr. Wilson.
So back when we had a 7-period day, that was the additional period we added into the day in order to accommodate that schedule. Once the 7th period was no longer there was no longer space within the schedule to maintain that. So we continued it as an elective program. Mr. Wagner has been teaching it ever since then. And we've incorporated into many of the curricular areas, projects that were consistent with that approach, but not as holistically as we would like to under the STEAM initiative. So, I mean, there are really 2 things you need to make any initiative successful. One is time and 2 is training. And so we have not had really either of those work to our advantage. So the new structure we have, where the teachers have the time together by content area, is going to be huge for this work. And that's going to be new, and that's going to be the springboard to try to buy us the time that we need to do the training to get people on board. And then
The 7th hour, that doesn't exist anymore?
the 7th hour does not exist anymore. We are on a 6-hour, what I would call a conventional day. And so we had the 7th period for 1 year, and then we reverted back to it.
The same thing happened to us at the high school. Kind of.
0 hours.
We have a 0 hour, and then we got the 7th, and I recall some real benefit from it. So what I'd like to do is come back to this at another time and discuss those benefits and the costs and why we don't have it. And that's tonight, though. Andy was good that he allowed me to bring this up at an agenda. Well, it's important. It's important, and I appreciate that. So, but I'd like to have some more discussion on this.
Let's put that in retreat.
We'll put it on our retreat, and then we'll dive into that a little further. And that you took the time tonight to come. That was important, and I appreciate that. So, like I said, do our best for you. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that'll close second call to the public. Dr. Chesney.
I'd like to make a motion that we have a closed session for the purpose of discussing negotiation strategies connected with BEA bargaining unit as much as the administration has requested a closed session. We need support.
Mr. Trombley? Yes. All right, Mr. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Birchfield?
Yes.
Mr. Myers? Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Dr. Chesney?
Yes.